This Christmas, my mother-in-law thought she'd have another round of humiliating her daughter-in-law, but when I walked through that door in a $40,000 gown, every chandelier, crystal glass, and cutting remark suddenly fell silent. The entire family waited for an apology instead. I raised my glass and revealed a truth they never dared imagine. She told me not to dress like cheap trash. This year, I responded by buying out her entire evening literally. My name is Olivia Hart, and last Christmas still burns in my memory like acid on silk. I was 33 then, sitting at the 18-foot mahogany table in the Whitmore family dining room, watching candlelight dance across crystal stemware while my mother-in-law Eleanor systematically destroyed me with a smile. The dress had cost $39 at a thrift store in Evanston. I'd found it 3 days before Christmas, after wiring most of my savings to help my best friend's sister with her chemotherapy bills. It was simple black crepe with long sleeves understated. I thought, appropriate. I'd steamed out the wrinkles myself, added my grandmother's pearl earrings, and felt quietly confident when Lucas picked me up that evening. "You look beautiful," my husband had said, kissing my temple as we pulled into his family's Lake Forest estate. Snow was falling in fat, lazy flakes, coating the elaborate topiary in white. Through the windows, golden light spilled onto the circular driveway where Audis and Mercedes sat like expensive ornaments. I should have known the moment Eleanor opened the door. Her eyes swept down my body in one practiced motion, cataloging every thread, every seam, every small imperfection. She wore Valentino, I knew, because she'd sent the link to all the daughters-in-law 2 weeks prior with the subject line, "Inspiration for Christmas evening." "Olivia, darling," she said, her voice honey over glass. "How brave of you." The dining room was already full when we entered. Lucas's sisters, their husbands, cousins I'd met twice, Eleanor's book club friends who'd been invited to make it a proper party. 23 people in total, each dressed as if attending a charity gala. I felt the weight of their glances like fingers testing fabric. Eleanor had assigned seats with handwritten place cards in gold calligraphy. Mine was between Lucas's teenage cousin, who spent the evening on her phone, and Eleanor's friend Margaret, who asked 3 times where I'd gotten my dress, each time with increasing disbelief when I deflected. The moment came during the 3rd course. Eleanor clinked her baccarat crystal with a silver spoon, the sound sharp enough to slice through conversation. "Before we continue," she began, standing with practiced grace, "I must share how grateful I am for family traditions. The way we present ourselves, the standards we maintain, these things matter. They're what separate the Whitmores from—" She paused, her eyes finding mine across the table. "Well, from those who don't understand the difference between thrift and thriftiness." The room went silent. Someone's fork scraped against china. I felt Lucas stiffen beside me, but he said nothing. He never did. "Take Olivia's dress, for example," Eleanor continued, her smile widening. "I'm sure she thought vintage was charming, but there's vintage, and then there's—" She laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "Whatever that is. Perhaps next year, dear, we can go shopping together. I know some lovely consignment shops that specialize in authentic pieces." Margaret leaned over, wine thick on her breath. "Don't worry, honey. We all start somewhere." I sat there, my hands steady on my lap, watching the chandelier light fracture through my water glass. I didn't defend myself, didn't mention the medical bills, or that my cheap dress was worth more to me than everything Eleanor wore. I simply observed how power worked at this table, how Eleanor orchestrated every conversation, every glance, every small humiliation like a conductor with a baton. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said finally, my voice carrying just enough to reach her. "You've taught me so much about value tonight," she preened, missing the edge in my words entirely. The rest of the evening blurred courses appeared and disappeared. Conversations swirled around me like smoke. But I was already elsewhere, already planning. As we drove home through the snowy streets, Lucas tried to apologize without actually apologizing. talking about his mother's high standards and how she meant well. I let him talk. In my mind, I was already making a promise to myself never again. But more than that, next Christmas, I would teach Eleanor Whitmore about value in a language she'd understand perfectly. The question wasn't whether I'd return to that table. The question was what I'd be wearing when I did. The Whitmore family operated like a Fortune 500 company, with Eleanor as CEO and the rest of us as employees under constant performance review. I learned this slowly over the 3 years of my marriage to Lucas, but it crystallized completely in the months following that Christmas dinner. Every Sunday, my phone would ping at exactly 9 a.m. With messages in the family group chat Eleanor had named Whitmore Excellence. Photos from charity galas, links to approved restaurants, subtle reminders about upcoming family events and their unspoken dress codes. The real control happened in the subgroups Whitmore Women for the Daughters-in-Law, where Eleanor would share inspiration that was actually mandates disguised as suggestions. In February, she created a new chat, Whitmore Attire Coordination. The cover story was avoiding duplicate outfits at events, but I recognized it for what it was, a surveillance system. Every planned outfit had to be submitted for coordination. Eleanor would respond with emoji reactions, champagne glasses for approval, thinking faces for reconsideration suggested. "It's just her way," Lucas said one evening when I showed him Eleanor's latest message, a link to a $3,000 dress with the note, "Perfect for Easter brunch." "Don't you think? Olivia?" Lucas was in his study, reviewing contracts for his law firm. He didn't look up from his papers when he spoke, a habit that had grown more pronounced since Christmas. "You know how she is about appearances. The Whitmore name carries weight in Chicago. She just wants to maintain standards." "Whose standards?" I asked. He finally looked up, his expression caught between irritation and exhaustion. "Does it matter? It's easier to just go along with it." That was Lucas always choosing the path of least resistance, especially when that path led away from confronting his mother. He loved me. I knew that. But his love was passive, comfortable, like an expensive sweater you forget you're wearing. I discovered Eleanor's most invasive habit by accident in March. While helping Lucas's sister Sophie set up her new phone, I noticed she had notifications from an Instagram account I didn't recognize. When I asked about it, Sophie laughed nervously. "Oh, that's Mom's secret account. She uses it to follow everyone, check what we're wearing, where we're going. She keeps notes." Notes. Sophie pulled up her laptop and, after making me swear to secrecy, showed me a shared Google Drive Eleanor maintained, folders for each family member, subfolders for events, spreadsheets tracking outfits, brands, estimated costs. My folder was the thickest. Comments like Nordstrom rack and same earrings third event and possible knockoff handbag investigate were scattered throughout. There was a document titled Olivia Integration Strategy that read like a corporate onboarding plan gone wrong. Phases for improvement, metrics for success, even a timeline for when I should be fully aligned with Whitmore standards. I screenshot everything before Sophie panicked and closed the laptop. That evening, I sat in my home office at North Bay Analytics, staring at those screenshots. My colleagues had left hours ago, but I remained, running data models that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with understanding the system I'd married into. Eleanor had turned family into an algorithm input appearances, output control. The spring months passed in careful observation. I attended every family function, wore acceptable outfits purchased from approved stores, smiled at Eleanor's corrections, but I was studying her like a data set, identifying patterns, vulnerabilities, the precise points where her system could be disrupted. "You've been different," Lucas noticed one evening in May. We were preparing for his parents' anniversary party, a black tie affair at the Chicago Yacht Club. "How so quieter, more compliant?" He said it like it was a good thing. I zipped up my dress, a safe navy blue Eleanor had pre-approved, and turned to face him. "I'm learning. Learning what the rules," I said. "All of them." Lucas kissed my forehead, pleased with what he interpreted as surrender. He didn't understand that silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. Every slight I didn't respond to, every controlling message I accepted without complaint, was data collected for a larger calculation. By June, I had mapped the entire Whitmore power structure. Eleanor's control wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about maintaining hierarchy, keeping the daughters-in-law grateful for acceptance, ensuring no one challenged her position as the family's creative director. The clothes were just tools. The dress code's a language of dominance everyone had learned to speak fluently. Except I was done being fluent in submission. As summer turned toward fall, as Eleanor began her annual escalation toward Christmas preparations, I made my decision. I wouldn't fight her system, I would use it. Every rule she'd created, every standard she'd imposed, would become the very weapons I'd wield against her. The only question was whether I'd have the resources to play at her level. That answer would come sooner than expected. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in July at 6:43 a.m. while I was drinking coffee in my kitchen and watching Lake Michigan shimmer through the morning haze. The sender was Crescent Ridge Bank's acquisitions department, and the subject line made my hand freeze mid-sip. Harborline Labs acquisition complete, distribution notice. 4 years ago, before I met Lucas, before I became another daughter-in-law in Eleanor's collection, I was someone else entirely. I'd co-founded Harborline Labs with 2 college friends in a cramped office above a Vietnamese restaurant in Uptown. We'd developed a predictive analytics tool for retail inventory, unsexy but revolutionary in its accuracy. When the partnership imploded over strategic differences, I walked away with 15% equity and a non-disclosure agreement thick as a novel. I'd almost forgotten about those shares, filed away with other remnants of my pre-Whitmore life. But Crescent Ridge Bank hadn't forgotten. They'd been circling Harborline for 2 years, and finally, the other founders had sold. My portion $8.2 million before taxes. After capital gains and state taxes, I was looking at $5.8 million. Clean, mine, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. I read the email 3 times before I believed it. Then I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and went to work as if nothing had changed. Lucas was in New York for depositions. Eleanor was texting the group chat about autumn wardrobe transitions. Everything was exactly as it had been an hour ago, except I now had the kind of money the Whitmores respected. The irony was sharp enough to cut. Eleanor had spent 3 years trying to teach me about value, never knowing I'd helped build something actually valuable. My first call was to Marla Keegan, an estate attorney I'd met at a data privacy conference years before Harborline. Marla specialized in discreet wealth management for women in complicated family situations. I need a trust, I told her, sitting in my parked car outside North Bay Analytics. Something separate, protected, that exists outside my marriage. Prenup, Marla asked. Yes, Lucas insisted on one, actually. His mother's requirement. Another irony. Eleanor's paranoia about gold diggers had created the very legal framework that would protect my windfall. Within 2 weeks, the Heart Renewal Trust was established. The name was deliberate, my maiden name, my renewal, my rules. The money moved silently from Crescent Ridge to the trust, then into carefully managed accounts. No flashy purchases, no sudden lifestyle changes. Just numbers on secured statements that Lucas would never see. I told no one. Not my sister in California. Not my best friend whose sister I'd helped with medical bills. Certainly not Lucas. I went to work, attended Whitmore functions, submitted outfit photos to Eleanor's approval system. But underneath the compliance, I was transforming into something Eleanor couldn't imagine, a woman with fuck you money who chose not to say fuck you. Yet, August brought the annual Whitmore Women's Weekend at Eleanor's Michigan Lake House. 4 days of forced bonding, where Eleanor would critique our swimsuits, suggest improvements to our fitness routines, and distribute copies of her favorite self-help books about elevating your presence. Olivia seems different. I overheard Eleanor tell Lucas's sister Sophie by the pool on the second day. I was supposedly napping on a lounger, hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Different how? Sophie asked. Settled, finally accepting her place. Eleanor's satisfaction dripped like honey. I knew she'd come around. They always do when they realize the alternative is being frozen out. That night, while the others drank wine and played Eleanor's favorite game of style interventions, where we helped each other by pointing out fashion mistakes, I excused myself for a walk. The lake was mirror still, reflecting a crescent moon. I stood on the dock, calculating. $5.8 million. Enough to buy my own lake house. Enough to never wear another pre-approved outfit. Enough to walk away entirely. But walking away wasn't the point. That would be admission that Eleanor had won, that her system had driven me out. No, I wanted something more precise to beat her at her own game, using her own rules, in front of her own audience. September crawled by with excruciating normalcy. I perfected my performance of the grateful daughter-in-law, even volunteering to help Eleanor plan the Christmas dinner. She was suspicious at first, then pleased, then ultimately convinced she'd successfully reformed me. "I'm so glad you finally understood," she told me over lunch at her club in early October. "The Whitmore way isn't about oppression, dear. It's about elevation. Some people need more guidance to reach the appropriate level." I smiled, nodded, sipped my overpriced salad soup. "You've taught me so much about maintaining standards. Eleanor." "Well," she preened, "it's my responsibility to preserve the family brand." The family brand, as if we were products on a shelf, requiring consistent packaging. I thought about the trust documents in Marla's office safe, about the power sleeping in those accounts, about the Christmas surprise I was already designing. "Speaking of the brand," Eleanor continued, "I've already selected the color scheme for Christmas dinner, winter white and gold. I'll send links for appropriate options. Nothing too experimental this year." "Yes, of course," I agreed. "Nothing experimental at all." That afternoon, I made my first purchase from the trust, a consultation fee for a plan that would redefine Eleanor's concept of value. It was beginning. The money was just fuel. The real weapon would be timing, presentation, and the perfect fucking dress. The Marigold Atelier occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in Chicago's West Loop, accessible only by private elevator with a security code. I'd found them through Marla, who mentioned they dressed senators' wives and tech billionaires who valued discretion over display. Perfect for what I had in mind. Mrs. Hart, the head designer, Simone, greeted me in a voice like aged whiskey. She was 60-something, French, with silver hair pulled into a chignon that could cut glass. "Marla said you need something transformative." The consultation room was all white marble and natural light, with a single orchid on a pedestal. No logos, no brand names, just quality that announced itself in whispers. "I need a gown for Christmas dinner," I said. "Something that follows every rule while breaking all of them." Simone's smile was knowing. "Ah, family politics. The most delicate kind of warfare." Over the next 3 hours, we built a weapon in fabric form. Duchess satin in ivory, technically within Eleanor's winter white mandate, but elevated beyond her imagination. The bodice would feature hidden corsetry, creating a silhouette that belonged in a museum. Hand-sewn moonstone beading that would catch light like captured stars. A detachable train for the entrance, transforming to a sleek column for dinner. "The base construction alone will be $25,000, Simone said without apology. "The beading, another 10. Custom modifications, 5. 40,000 total," I confirmed. "I want receipts, detailed ones." She raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Rich people," her expression said, "and their peculiar needs." The fittings took place every 2 weeks, always at 7 a.m., before anyone in my life was awake. I stood on the platform while Simone's team worked like surgeons, adjusting every millimeter. The dress began to feel less like clothing and more like armor, beautiful, bulletproof armor. Meanwhile, I orchestrated the supporting elements. Somerset Event Rentals agreed to deliver a set of Baccarat crystal glasses, engraved with my initials, to the Whitmore estate on Christmas Eve after midnight. A surprise gift for the family, I explained, knowing Eleanor would assume they were from her preferred vendor and use them without question. I hired Ava Monroe, a makeup artist who'd worked on 3 Vogue covers, booking her for a house call at 4 p.m. on Christmas Day. The photographer was trickier. I needed someone good enough to seem natural at a society event, but discreet enough not to ask questions. I found him through North Bay's PR department, James Liu, who shot corporate events but had an artist's eye for power dynamics. "I want you to capture a specific moment," I told him over coffee in November. "There will be a toast. When I raise my glass, I need every angle, every reaction, especially one woman's face." "Sounds like a proposal or a murder," he said. "Something in between." The hardest part was hiding it all from Lucas. By December, he'd noticed the early morning absences, the private phone calls, the new passwords on my devices. "Is everything okay?" he asked one evening as I declined to show him my phone screen. "You've been distant." We were in our Lincoln Park townhouse, him drinking scotch, me pretending to read while actually reviewing lighting diagrams Simone had sent. She'd analyzed the Whitmore dining room's chandelier placement to ensure maximum luminosity on the satin. "I'm planning something for Christmas," I said truthfully. "For Mother." He looked pleased. "She mentioned you've been helpful with the arrangements." "Something like that." Lucas moved behind my chair, kissing the top of my head. "I'm glad you two are getting along better. It means a lot to me." I wondered what would mean more to him, his wife's happiness or his mother's approval. After 3 years of marriage, I still wasn't sure he knew they were mutually exclusive. 2 weeks before Christmas, Eleanor sent her final outfit mandate. "Remember, ladies winter white or champagne only." I've included links to pre-approved options ranging from $500 to $2,000. Let's keep things elegant but not ostentatious. We're Whitmores, not reality TV stars. I responded with a champagne emoji and ordered one of her suggested dresses, a safe, boring sheath that would never leave its garment bag. The final marigold fitting was December 23rd. The completed gown hung on its custom form like liquid moonlight. Simone had added one last detail I hadn't requested: a tiny pocket hidden in the bodice seam. "For lipstick," she said. "Or perhaps a small recording device. One never knows what evidence a woman might need to carry." I laughed, but slipped my phone inside to test it. Perfect fit. That evening, Lucas found me in my closet, staring at the decoy dress Eleanor had approved. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "No," I said, running my hand along the boring beige fabric. "I know exactly what I'm wearing." He wrapped his arms around me from behind. "Mother will be impressed you took her suggestions." I leaned into him, feeling the weight of my secret like Simone's moonstones, precious, hidden, about to catch the light in ways nobody expected. "Your mother's about to see a side of me she never has before," I said. Lucas chuckled, misunderstanding completely. "She'll love seeing you embrace the Whitmore standards." Through my closet window, snow began to fall. 24 hours until curtain rise. The dress waited at Marigold. The glasses were in position, every player hired and ready. Eleanor wanted a performance of power. I'd give her one she'd remember for the rest of her privileged life. The leak started with whispers, exactly as I'd designed it. 3 days before Christmas, Eleanor's friend Margaret accidentally mentioned at the country club that she'd heard Olivia Whitmore had been seen shopping at discount stores again. "Even worse than last year," Margaret said loudly enough for 6 tables to hear. "Eleanor showed me security footage from Nordstrom Rack. That poor girl was actually checking price tags on clearance items." The security footage was real, I'd made sure of it. 2 weeks earlier, I'd spent an afternoon deliberately shopping in front of cameras, holding up items with visible red sale tags, even taking photos of price labels. I'd bought nothing but gave a perfect performance of someone desperately hunting for bargains. Eleanor amplified the narrative immediately. By December 23rd, she'd sent 3 messages to the Whitmore Women Chat, Ladies, reminder that presentation reflects on all of us. I've attached a guide to identifying authentic designer items versus replicas. If anyone needs financial assistance for appropriate attire, please speak to me privately. That last one was aimed directly at me, delivered with surgical precision. Lucas saw the messages and flushed. She doesn't mean. She means exactly what she wrote, I said calmly, continuing to pack my overnight bag for Christmas Eve at the estate. Your mother thinks I can't afford to dress appropriately. I could talk to her. No. I folded a silk scarf with deliberate care. Let her think what she wants. What Eleanor didn't know was that I'd been feeding her false information for weeks through Sophie, who'd become an unwitting accomplice. I'd confided in Sophie about financial stress, knowing she'd report back to Eleanor. I'd left fake bank statements on my desk when Sophie visited, showing dwindling balances. I'd even staged a phone call about payment plans while Sophie was in earshot. Meanwhile, Marla Keegan had been executing the second phase. The Heart Renewal Trust's donation to the Midwest Craft Bursary, $250,000 earmarked for fashion education, was real, but the paperwork was deliberately complex. The announcement specified that the donation would be revealed at a formal gathering on Christmas Day, with full media coverage, positioned as a gift from the Whitmore family's commitment to arts education. Eleanor had skimmed the documents Marla sent, seen Whitmore, Christmas announcement, and media coverage, and immediately agreed. She thought it was her chance to position herself as a philanthropist, never reading the fine print that clearly stated the true donor would be revealed at the moment of announcement. This is perfect, Eleanor had told me when approving the arrangement. We'll show those new money tech families what real charitable giving looks like. I'd nodded enthusiastically. The photographers will love the story-established family supporting emerging artists. On December 23rd, I made one final move. I posted a single Instagram story, a picture of my grandmother's pearl earrings with the caption, "Sometimes the most precious things have no price tag." Eleanor screenshotted immediately, sending it to Margaret with laughing emojis and the comment, "She's actually trying to make poverty sound noble." That evening, as Lucas and I prepared to leave for the estate, I received a text from James Liu, the photographer. Credentials confirmed. I'll be there at 6:30 p.m. sharp? The local society reporter from the Chicago Tribune had also confirmed, along with a videographer who'd been told to expect a significant philanthropic announcement from one of Lake Forest's premier families. You seem calm, Lucas observed as we loaded the car. Snow was falling steadily, turning the city into a snow globe. Why wouldn't I be? Well, Mother has been particularly focused this year. I smiled, thinking of the $40,000 gown waiting in Marigold's climate-controlled delivery van, scheduled to arrive at the estate at exactly 5:45 p.m. tomorrow, 15 minutes before Ava Monroe would transform me into something Eleanor had never imagined. Your mother has taught me so much about the importance of appearances, I said. Tomorrow, I'm going to show her exactly what I've learned. Lucas reached over to squeeze my hand as we drove north along Lakeshore Drive. I'm proud of you for taking the high road with her. The high road. If only he knew I was about to take a road so elevated Eleanor would need oxygen to reach it. That night, as I lay in the guest room at the Whitmore estate, I could hear Eleanor on the phone with her event coordinator, confirming every detail for tomorrow's dinner. She mentioned my name twice, both times with barely concealed disdain. Yes, all the daughters-in-law will be appropriately dressed. Well, most of them. We do our best with what we have to work with. I smiled in the darkness. 12 hours until the curtain rose. The bait was set, the trap was armed, and Eleanor was about to learn that the daughter-in-law she'd dismissed as cheap had been playing chess while she was still arranging checkers. My phone buzzed with a text from Simone at Marigold. Your gown is prepared. It's been an honor to create something worthy of tomorrow's performance. I deleted the text, closed my eyes, and dreamed of moonstone beating catching chandelier light while Eleanor's world shifted beneath her designer heels. Christmas Day arrived wrapped in perfect snow, the kind that makes everything look like a luxury car commercial. The Whitmore estate gleamed under white drifts, every window glowing amber against the winter dusk. By 5:30 p.m., the house hummed with preparation caterers arranging canapes, Eleanor's voice carrying from the dining room as she micromanaged centerpiece placement. I stood in the guest suite, watching through frosted windows as the marigold van pulled into the service entrance. Discreet, professional, invisible to the family gathered downstairs for cocktails. The doorbell rang at exactly 5:45 p.m. "Delivery for Mrs. Hart," I heard someone say below. "I'll get it," I called, already moving. Eleanor intercepted me on the stairs. She wore Saint Laurent, of course, winter white with gold hardware that caught the light like tiny suns. Her eyes swept over my robe I hadn't dressed yet, and her smile sharpened. "Still not ready. Olivia guests arrive in 45 minutes. "Just a delivery I've been expecting," I said pleasantly. "Nothing too last minute. I hope. We wouldn't want another situation like last year." I smiled. "No, Eleanor, this has been planned for months." The Marigold team worked with surgical precision. The gown arrived in a temperature-controlled garment bag, accompanied by 2 dressers who would help with the corsetry. Ava Monroe had already set up her station lights, mirrors, enough cosmetics to paint the Sistine Chapel. "My God," Ava breathed when she saw the dress. "This is Simone's work. Isn't it I've only seen 3 of her pieces in person?" The transformation took 40 minutes. First, the hidden corsetry, engineered to create a silhouette that defied anatomy. Then the gown itself, sliding over my skin like cool water. The moonstones caught the light even in the dim dressing room, creating constellations across the bodice. The train attached with invisible hooks, falling 12 feet behind me in liquid ivory. Ava's work was equally masterful, not the Instagram-heavy makeup Eleanor expected, but something timeless. Old Hollywood meets modern precision. My hair swept up to show the neck, the shoulders, the architectural lines of the dress. At 6:25 p.m., I heard the first guests arriving. Eleanor's voice rose in greeting, that particular pitch she used for people she wanted to impress. The Tribune reporter was here. I recognized her laugh. James Liu would be setting up his equipment, testing angles. I draped the velvet cape over my shoulders, hiding everything but the suggestion of elegance beneath. From the hallway, I could hear Lucas asking Sophie if she'd seen me. 5 minutes, I told my reflection. The descent required calculation. The Whitmore staircase curved like a question mark, designed for entrances. I could hear the party below, 23 voices mixing with classical music, champagne flutes singing against each other, the soft chaos of wealth at leisure. I waited until I heard Eleanor call everyone to move toward the dining room. Perfect timing, they'd all be in the foyer. Impossible to miss me. The first step creaked, as I knew it would. Conversations stuttered. I descended slowly, one hand on the banister, the cape still closed. Lucas stood at the bottom, his mouth slightly open. Sophie gasped. Margaret dropped her clutch. Eleanor turned last, her expression cycling through confusion, dismissal, then the beginning of rage. I reached the bottom step and let the cape fall. The silence was complete, absolute, the kind that costs $40,000 to achieve. The gown revealed itself in stages first, the bodice with its constellation of moonstones, then the silk that seemed to liquefy in the chandelier light. Finally, the train that pooled behind me like spilled cream. Every thread caught the light differently, creating an aurora effect that made the room's actual decorations look like dollar store tinsel. James Liu's camera clicked rapidly, catching every angle, every reaction. The Tribune reporter stepped forward, then back, her phone already recording. "Olivia," Eleanor's voice cracked like ice. "That's quite ambitious." I smiled, moving forward, the train whispering across marble. "You said winter white and gold, Eleanor. I simply followed your guidelines." "Where did you—" Margaret started, then stopped, recognizing quality that didn't need explanation. "It's marigold," Someone whispered. That's definitely Simone's work. Eleanor's face had gone pale, then red, cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. She knew everyone knew that Marigold didn't make gowns under $30,000. The moonstones alone were worth more than most cars in the driveway. How thoughtful of you to dress up, Eleanor managed, her smile toxic, though perhaps a bit excessive for a family dinner. I touched one of the moonstones at my throat. You taught me that presentation matters, Eleanor, that how we present ourselves reflects on the entire family. I turned to include everyone in my smile. I wanted to make sure I properly represented the Whitmore standards tonight. Lucas stood frozen, calculating math that didn't add up. Sophie was taking photos, unable to help herself. The cousins whispered behind manicured hands. But Eleanor looked like someone had just served her divorce papers at her own anniversary party. Shall we? I gestured toward the dining room. I believe you mentioned dinner at 7. As I passed Eleanor, my train brushed her shoes. She had to step back or risk tripping. The photographer caught that too the moment Eleanor Whitmore retreated from her daughter-in-law, the moment the hierarchy cracked. Stunning, the Tribune reporter said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mrs. Whitmore, that gown is absolutely stunning. She meant me, not Eleanor. Everyone knew it. The shift was palpable, tectonic, expensive. Eleanor's smile became rigid as taxidermy. Yes, well, dinner is served. The dining room glowed like the inside of a champagne flute. Eleanor had positioned herself at the head of the table, ready to orchestrate another evening of subtle humiliation. But tonight, the crystal glasses bore my initials O.H., etched so delicately most wouldn't notice until they lifted them to drink. Eleanor rose, tapping her glass with a silver spoon. The sound rang out like a warning bell. Before we begin, she started, her voice reclaiming its commanding tone. I want to thank everyone for joining our family tradition. Tonight is particularly special because we'll be announcing a significant charitable contribution. I stood. The movement was simple, but in that dress, under those lights, it commanded the room like a spotlight had found its mark. Eleanor's words died in her throat. If I may, I said, my voice carrying perfectly in the acoustic space Eleanor had designed for her own performances. Since this announcement involves my personal contribution, I should be the one to share it. Eleanor's fingers went white around her glass. Your contribution? Yes. I lifted my own glass, the one with my initials catching the light. Though I'm grateful you were willing to host the announcement here. Eleanor, your enthusiasm when Marla sent the paperwork was touching. The Tribune reporter leaned forward. James Liu positioned himself for the perfect shot. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, turning to address the room. Tonight, I'm honored to announce the establishment of the Midwest Craft Bursary, a $250,000 endowment to support aspiring fashion designers from working-class backgrounds. Murmurs rippled through the room. Eleanor started to speak, but I wasn't finished. This fund will provide full scholarships to talented individuals who might otherwise never access fashion education. People who know the value of clothing not from price tags, but from understanding what it means to make beauty from limitation. I paused, letting the words settle like snow. Last Christmas, I wore a $39 dress to this table. Some of you might remember the conversation that followed. I didn't look at Eleanor, didn't need to. Everyone remembered. That dress was what I could afford after helping a friend with medical bills. I wasn't ashamed of it then, and I'm not ashamed of it now. Sophie gasped softly. Lucas stood frozen by the window. But it taught me something valuable about how this family measures worth. I touched one of the moonstones at my throat. So tonight, I decided to speak in the language that's preferred here. This gown cost $40,000. The beading alone took 3 seamstresses 6 weeks to complete. It's one of 12 that Simone at Marigold will make this year. Eleanor found her voice. Olivia, this is hardly... I'm not finished. My tone was pleasant but firm. The $250,000 for the bursary comes from my personal funds money I earned building something real, something that had value beyond its appearance. Money none of you knew existed because I chose not to share it. Because in this family, financial transparency only flows one direction. I pulled a document from the hidden pocket in my bodice. Simone had been right about its usefulness. This is the establishment document for the Whitmore Conservatory of Arts, a fashion education space in downtown Lake Forest. Beautiful name. Isn't it perfect for the Whitmore legacy? Eleanor's face flickered with interest, despite herself. However, I continued, the naming rights come with conditions. The Whitmore name can only be used if this family, specifically you. Eleanor agrees to dissolve the surveillance system you've created. No more outfit approval chats, no more secret Instagram monitoring, no more spreadsheets ranking your daughters-in-law by their clothing costs. Margaret's gasp was audible. Sophie's phone clattered to the table. Oh, yes, I said, finally looking directly at Eleanor. I know about all of it. The Google Drive folders, the notes, the integration strategy you developed for me like I was a hostile takeover that needed managing. The reporter was typing furiously. James's camera captured Eleanor's face, a masterpiece of collapsed composure. If these conditions aren't met, I said, lifting the document, the space will be called the Heart Community Atelier instead, named for my family, the ones who taught me that grace isn't about labels, and value isn't about price. Lucas finally moved, stepping toward me. Olivia, what are you? I'm done being audited, Lucas. Done being measured by standards that have nothing to do with worth and everything to do with control. I softened my voice for him. I love you, but I will not spend another year being diminished by your mother's insecurity dressed up as elegance. Eleanor's voice came out strangled. You're trying to buy your way into respect. No, I said, setting down my glass with a definitive clink. I'm showing you that I already had it. You just couldn't see it past your own prejudice. I lifted my phone, showing the bank confirmation. The donation is already processed. The press release goes out in an hour. The only question is which name will be on the building. The room held its breath. 23 people waited to see if Eleanor Whitmore would bend or break. She stood slowly, her designer dress suddenly looking like costume armor that no longer fit. You planned this. Every detail, I confirmed, with the same precision you use to humiliate people at your own table. The only difference is my plan builds something. Yours only tears down. Eleanor looked around the room at the photographers, the reporters, her family watching her like strangers. The empire of control she'd built was crumbling, and everyone could see the foundation had always been fear, not respect. Your choice, Eleanor, I said, lifting my glass one final time. The Whitmore Conservatory of Arts, or the Heart Community Atelier? Either way, young designers will learn their craft, but only one option lets you keep your family's name on something beautiful. The silence stretched like pulled sugar, ready to snap. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 7:30 p.m., each chime falling into silence like stones into deep water. Eleanor stood at the head of her table, her kingdom of crystal and silver suddenly feeling like a stage where she'd forgotten her lines. Then, something shifted in her face. The panic smoothed into calculation, the calculation into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She began to clap slow, deliberate applause that echoed through the dining room. Brava, Eleanor said, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. What a performance. But I was ready for this too. I'd studied Eleanor Whitmore for 3 years, knew every move in her playbook, the gracious surrender that wasn't surrender at all, the tactical retreat disguised as magnanimity. It's not a performance, I said simply. It's a choice, and you have 30 seconds to make yours before the press release goes live. James Liu raised his camera, capturing Eleanor's frozen smile. The Tribune reporter held her phone steady, recording everything. Eleanor's jaw tightened. She looked at Lucas, perhaps hoping for rescue. But my husband stood beside me now, not between us, not behind his mother, but finally, definitively, With his wife. Mom, Lucas said quietly. Enough. That single word from her son broke something in Eleanor's composure. Her shoulders sagged minutely, imperceptibly to anyone who hadn't spent years cataloging her micro-expressions. The Whitmore Conservatory of Arts, she said, each word precise as a contract signature. And the surveillance, as you call it, ends. I nodded, pulling up my phone to confirm the naming with Marla. The documents will be delivered tomorrow for your signature. The room exhaled collectively. Conversations sparked tentatively, like matches in wind. But I wasn't finished. I picked up the pen from the place setting Eleanor's own Mont Blanc, because of course even the pens had to be branded and signed the donation papers right there, on Eleanor's antique table, surrounded by the family that had tried to diminish me. The photographer captured it all, the $40,000 gown bending gracefully as I wrote, the moonstone catching light like captured stars, Eleanor in the background, her empire of appearances finally, definitively, ended. There's champagne in the kitchen, I announced to the room. The good stuff, not the brand Eleanor usually serves to daughters-in-law. Sophie laughed, actually laughed, and rushed to get it. The cousins followed, the entire careful choreography of Eleanor's evening dissolving into something genuine, something unscripted. Lucas took my hand, his fingers trembling slightly. The money, how? I built something before I met you, I said. Something valuable. I just chose not to mention it because in your family, money talks but only in one direction. 5.8 million. He'd done the math. After taxes. He pulled me closer, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt him choose me over the path of least resistance. I'm sorry, he whispered, for every time I stayed silent. Eleanor remained at the head of the table, alone now except for Margaret, who seemed torn between loyalty and the gravitational pull of drama unfolding in the kitchen. The matriarch of the Whitmore family looked smaller somehow, as if the designer dress was wearing her instead of the other way around. I walked over to her, my train sweeping across her perfect floors one last time. This didn't have to be a war, Eleanor, I said quietly. Just for her. You could have just accepted me. She looked up, and for a moment, I saw something real in her eyes, not the calculating society woman, but someone who'd been taught that control was the only form of love that lasted. That dress, she said finally. It's magnificent. I know, I said, but it's just a dress. I turned to go, then stopped. Oh, and Eleanor next Christmas. I'm wearing jeans. The sound she made might have been a laugh or a sob. I didn't look back to check. The rest of the evening became the kind of story that gets told at family gatherings for generations. How Sophie got wine drunk and admitted she'd always hated the approval chat. How the cousins took turns trying on my cape and taking selfies. How the Tribune reporter got her story of the year, daughter-in-law's Christmas coup fashion fortune, and family revenge served cold in couture. As the evening wound down, James Liu showed me some of the photographs on his camera's preview screen. There was one that stopped my breath the moment I'd signed the papers, with Eleanor in the background, her face a masterwork of dawning realization. The old order changing, captured in pixels and moonstone light. That one, I said. Send me that one. Lucas and I left at 10:45 p.m., my train requiring careful navigation through the door. Eleanor didn't say goodbye, but she didn't need to. The contracts would speak louder than any farewell. As we drove home through the snowy streets, Lucas kept glancing at me like I was a stranger wearing his wife's face. You know what the ironic part is, I said, watching the lake shimmer under moonlight. What? I actually would have worn a $39 dress tonight if she hadn't made it about shame. I would have been perfectly happy being middle-class Olivia who loved her husband and tolerated his mother. But she had to make it about worth. So I showed her what worth looked like. Lucas reached over and took my hand. That fund, it's really going to help people. Every year, 5 students who couldn't afford fashion school will get to learn their craft. They'll make beautiful things, And every piece they create will be worth more than Eleanor's entire wardrobe, because it will come from passion, not privilege. We pulled into our driveway at 11:20 p.m. The dress required both of us to manage getting it through our front door, a $40,000 reminder that some statements are too important to whisper. Later, as I hung the gown in my closet, I thought about next Christmas. Jeans. Definitely. Maybe the same thrift store pair I'd worn the day I met Lucas, because now that I'd spoken Eleanor's language and beaten her at her own game, I was free to never speak it again. The moonstone beating caught the closet light one last time before I closed the door. $40,000 to buy my freedom from a woman who thought she owned me. Worth every penny. Thank you so much for listening to this story of standing up to family bullies and reclaiming your worth. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own experiences with family dynamics and finding your voice. Your stories inspire me to keep sharing these tales of triumph and transformation.